Hi guys, this is Group 41's Uber presentation, and we're going to be exploring whether Uber drivers deserve certain protections that should be provided for by Uber. One of the main topics in this debate over whether Uber should provide, or I guess in this case not provide, protections to Uber drivers is Uber's refusal to pay their drivers the national minimum wage. This issue has actually been debated in court recently in the Aslam versus Uber case, where two Uber drivers, Mr. Yassine Aslam and Mr. James Farrar, claim that they should be paid the minimum wage under the National Minimum Wage Act of 1998, as well as being entitled to receive paid annual leave under the Working Time Regulations Act of 1998 also. And the minimum wage in the UK is currently £7.38 for those under 25 years of age and £7.83 for those 25 plus. And Uber's defense was that their drivers are self-employed rather than employees, and therefore Uber is not responsible to pay them national minimum wage. However, many characteristics of an Uber driver's job do not fulfill the sort of requirements to class as being self-employed rather than employees of Uber. For example, Uber subjected its drivers to substantial control and monitoring through its app, and they also calculate the driver's average star rating, cancellation and acceptance rate, and there are consequences for not meeting these requirements. If a driver cancels multiple times consecutively, they're also temporarily logged out of the app, and the drivers also are required to work personally, so they can't get someone else to fill in for their shift. And all of these characteristics are not consistent of one being self-employed and points towards Uber drivers being employees of Uber, despite what Uber claim. And from a worker point of view, Uber withholding minimum wage from them is unethical. Relating to the Aslam case against Uber, Uber views their drivers as self-employed rather than as employees, despite features of an Uber driver's job that are more like those that are employed by an organization rather than being self-employed. This is used as a justification by Uber for not providing protections that other taxi companies in the UK may do. And on top of this, Uber frame themselves as a, quote, technology platform that connects riders and drivers while taking an admin fee in the process. So it doesn't really view itself as a traditional taxi service, and therefore doesn't view itself as primarily responsible regarding issues such as driver wage and welfare. And it doesn't really feel that they need to implement the same background checks and security checks that taxi companies are required by law to do with their employees in the UK. And from Uber's perspective, having to pay for protection such as national minimum wage reduces their competitiveness, because Uber actually occupy quite a large market share in their domain. And the Times in 2017 reported that the market share and turnover of the top 100 taxi and minicab firms in the UK fell for the first time in 2017 due to the rise of Uber. And Uber having to pay for such protections such as national minimum wage would obviously increase their running costs. And as costs are naturally passed on to the consumer, there may be fears that them incurring such costs will reduce their competitiveness. And this quote from Tom Elvidge, Uber UK's acting general manager, sort of reinforces Uber's perspective on this whole matter. So Elvidge said, almost all taxi and private hire drivers have been self-employed for decades, long before our app existed. The main reason why drivers use Uber is because they value the freedom to choose if, when and where they drive, and so we intend to appeal. So again, Uber don't really view themselves as liable for paying for such protections. Another controversial issue regarding Uber's treatment and protections of its drivers are Uber's dismissal policies towards its drivers. Now, the Advisory, Conciliation and Arbitration Service in the UK oversees such codes of practice, and Uber's policy at the moment isn't really clear, so it doesn't really tell Uber drivers outright that their services are no longer required. What happens instead is Uber sends an error message through the app that doesn't really clearly state dismissal, such as maybe your account needs attention, or the partner account you drive on has been disabled, or your account has been placed on hold. And this doesn't really give a clear reason to the drivers, telling them why their account has been deactivated, or give them any real official warning of unacceptable behavior. And this doesn't really provide an olive branch or give an effort to restore the relationship between Uber and their drivers. So this is the ACS disciplinary model, which consists of 3 key steps. Firstly, informal action, where the individual accused of wrongdoing is spoken to on a casual level first. And then if this is unsuccessful, formal action may be taken, which may involve a meeting to discuss this individual's behavior. And only then can a final written warning and then dismissal be given. And even with dismissal, there has to be a notice, a 2 weeks notice before dismissal. And Uber's policy at the moment completely bypasses all 3 of these steps. And as Uber drivers consider Uber as an investment of not only money but time, so Uber drivers are responsible for things such as car maintenance. An abrupt dismissal by Uber can be quite damaging, so they're left with no clear source of income. And there's been protests and controversy over this issue, with many suggesting that Uber should actually follow the appropriate practices for dismissal. Some say that Uber's dismissal policies, which is basically firing drivers at will, so strengthens the claim that Uber drivers themselves are not actually self-employed and rather under the jurisdiction of Uber, and should also therefore be entitled to protections that other taxi companies give their drivers. And this quote from Forbes pretty much sums up the controversy surrounding Uber's dismissal policies. So some drivers feel that Uber is taking advantage of the Uber drivers via loopholes in their unclear dismissal policies, and a lot of drivers feel that Uber are actually using this discrepancy to silence drivers that are critical of Uber and their policies, including dismissal policies. And this really makes it sound like an autocratic regime that, of course, seems quite unpleasant to work under. So, in conclusion, Uber drivers do want protections such as national minimum wage and a fair dismissal procedure from Uber, and have accused Uber of being exploitative in their interpretation of the law, and they seem to be taking advantage of the grey area between an employee and one that is self-employed. But from Uber's perspective, they do not view themselves as a taxi service, so they don't really hold themselves as responsible for providing such protections. Thank you.